our friend Brad Nessler. Brad, good morning. How you doing?
How you doing, my friend? Happy Wednesday.
Back at you. Thanks so much for joining us. And last year, LSU seemed to be rudderless in first year to Coach O, and this year, to this point in time, it certainly has felt different. I know last week wasn't great, but for LSU, how much of the difference has been maybe more stability or confidence from the coaching standpoint, experience there for Coach O? How much of it happens because the cornerback play has been better?
It's a lot different, and he did have a few bumps in the road last week. Joe threw a couple picks for the first time this year, and one of them was a clincher on a pick six. But, they believe in him. When they beat those top 10 teams in the first, 3 weeks of the season, I think the kids started believing, because here comes a guy from Ohio State. We don't know him. He wants to eat salad in the dinner line instead of gumbo and fried chicken and whatever. They don't get the guy, And then he wins a couple big games, especially when he did the Auburn game. He had some tough runs and some huge throws in the game that Gary and I and Jamie did. And they started believing. And I think they'll still believe. He's 5-1 as a starter. Things got away from him in Florida last week. But I think Coach Orgeron as well, they just believe right now. So they're probably above where they wanted, where a lot of people thought they were going to be, and they're in a good spot, ranked 13th, 5-1. I think they'll take that right now, considering the schedule they've had. Now the schedule doesn't get any easier. It starts on Saturday.
Outside of last week against the Gators in the Swamp, the offense, as you mentioned, have been pretty good for LSU throughout this season. And they really have been able to create big plays, especially at the wideout position. That's something that's kind of rare for LSU. But can they do that against Georgia's defense? We know how athletic and good and deep Georgia's defense is. Do you think that's a problem spot for the Tigers coming up on Saturday?
I love the matchup. I really like Justin Jefferson a lot. He's their leading receiver. They have other guys that are impressive, too. Derek Dillon and Stephon Sullivan, Jamar Chase, Foster Morrow. Their tight end's good. So, they've got a lot of talent at the wide receiver spot, but Georgia has got two really good guys in the secondary. They've got some youth as well, but DeAndre Baker, if people just want to watch a matchup, Justin Jefferson, DeAndre Baker, that'll be a good one. DeAndre's as good a corner, I think, as there is in the SEC at least, and one of the better ones in the country. And J.R. Reed at safety is as good as there is. So now, if you get a matchup of one of the top receivers for LSU against Tyson Campbell, the freshman for Georgia, that's where I'd want to go to work if I'm Steve Emsinger, the offensive coordinator. I'd try to get a little something done on the freshman, because he's never been in a road environment like he'll see at Death Valley. And Georgia's got 3 or 4 freshmen starting in this game, or at least that will play a lot in this game, that kind of haven't seen the atmosphere that they're going to see at Baton Rouge on Saturday.
Brad Nessler has the call for the SEC on CBS coming up on Saturday, Georgia and LSU. From a Georgia standpoint, man, they are just a machine right now. They haven't played a close game all season, but this is a good stretch for them. They're at LSU, and then, of course, the outdoor cocktail party next week after that, or 2 weeks after that, Kentucky in Kentucky, and then Auburn at home. These next 4 weeks will tell us a lot about Georgia, but to this point in time, have they exceeded your expectations coming out of last season?
This is funny, because I live in Georgia, and all my friends that are Bulldog fans, this is what they think of 6-0 and ranked number 2. I'm like, hey, they're scoring 43 a game, okay? They're only giving up 13. They just don't think Georgia's that good, or has not played that good.
Wow.
They haven't really played a very tough schedule. Let's face it, the 4 teams they played from the SEC, South Carolina was supposed to give them trouble. That didn't happen. Vandy, Tennessee, kind of like, you're supposed to beat Vandy in Tennessee. And Missouri, they played at Missouri. So that's what everybody thinks down here in the South about Georgia and their 6-0 start. And yet you look at the numbers and you go, well, I don't know what else you want. They're leading the conference in rushing. They're number 3 against the run. They're only giving up 13 points a game. They've scored 40-plus in 5 of the 6 games, and the other game was 38. I don't know what the people want, but I do agree that the teams they played, they should have beaten, and probably should have beaten in the manner that they beat them. Now, they haven't played a lot of their starters in the fourth quarter. I don't know how much Jake Fromm has played in the fourth quarter, but this is the 3rd game I've done, and I only saw him for like a snap. And it's the same way sort of with Alabama with Tua and Jalen. But, this is the deep end of the pool now, the rest of the way. So they've been kind of waiting around in the 2-foot water, and now they're jumping in the deep end. So we'll find out.
So the Gators got their best win of the season last week against LSU. Their last 2 weeks beating a ranked Mississippi State team on the road and then beating LSU, as I just mentioned.
Yep.
For Dan Mullen, I think people thought it was going to take some time because Dan has also tried to quiet some expectations. But do you think they're ahead of schedule under Mullen?
Yeah, I do. I actually thought the offense would be a little bit ahead of the game more than it is, and they're not doing bad. But I kind of like the cupboard wasn't left empty on defense, and that's where their strong point is. I mean, they're forcing fumbles, they're scoring points off turnovers, all the kind of stuff that, and not necessarily, actually they're penalized a lot, but it doesn't seem to matter to them. Their defense knows how to turn the ball over and give it back to their offense on a short field, and that's perfect for Felipe Franks and Jordan Scarlett and those guys. So their offense is just good enough, and their defense is really good.
Takes us to Auburn, and this has been a roller coaster season coming into the year. Big expectations as always on the Plains. Started out very good, and now we're looking at Auburn after a couple of losses and wondering what type of team this really is. How do you figure the Tigers at this point of the season?
I'm totally puzzled. I don't know what's going on. I know their offensive line wasn't that great to start with, and they're still shuffling people, and that hasn't helped. I don't know what's happened to Jarrett Stidham. The only thing I can think of, and I had them earlier in the year, and they played really well, and then they let the game slip away to LSU just like they did last year on the road. Unless the wheels started wobbling as soon as that happened and they thought, how did we not win this game? I don't know. The only thing I can look at and say, bring back Kerryon Johnson and we'll see how it works out for you. He was the guy that kept them rolling last year. I don't care, and that's why he was Player of the Year. And I think I called that halfway through the season. I said, if he's not the best player or the most important player to his team, then I haven't seen one. And he's playing for the Lions or whoever it is. And they just don't have a replacement for that. And for some reason, their offense is just not there. I don't know what's going on. I'll see him again in a couple weeks, and maybe I'll have a better answer for you.
Final question. Brad Nessler joins us here on the DA Show on CBS Sports Radio. Bama is the number one team of the country with a bullet. Their 3 biggest challenges will be at LSU, against Mississippi State, and then against Auburn in the Iron Bowl. But that one's at home to finish off the season.
Yep.
Do you think out of any of those 3 games, they will be challenged before they get to a potential SEC title game against the Bulldogs?
Challenged, yes, for sure. Lose, I doubt it. I don't think so. They're not as good as in some Alabama teams in some areas. Their defense isn't as good. But if you just said, we're going to play 7-on-7, I'm taking their 7. I'm taking Jerry Jeudy, Devontae Smith, Henry Ruggs, Irv Smith, Tua. You can even throw Jalen in there. We'll play 8-on-8, and then give me their running backs. I'd take those guys against anybody. So that's how good I think their offense can be if they just said, we're not going to worry about jamming it down your throat. We're just going to play to our strengths. If they play to their strengths and they let Tua play all 4 quarters, they can score 50 on anybody, I think.
Brad Nessler, lead announcer, SEC on CBS. He's on the call, of course, Saturday. Georgia is traveling to LSU, 3:30 p.m. Eastern kick, 2:30 p.m. Central Time, of course, on CBS. Brad, it's always fun to catch up. Thanks so much. Have a great call.
You got it, D.A. Take care, man.
Okay, you too. Brad Nessler joining us this morning here on the show.